Todd Davis, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, John. Pleasure to be here.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Salt Lake City, Utah. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Orem, Utah. And today we're going to be talking about strategies for managing emotional tension in difficult conversations. This is your specialty area, among others. Today, it's just such a pleasure to be able to sit down with you. We could probably be doing this in person, but we're doing it virtually. As we get started, I wanted to share Todd's bio with everybody. Todd Davis is a senior consultant and thought leader at FranklinCovey. With over 35 years of experience in human resources, talent development, and executive recruiting, Todd spent 27 years as Chief People Officer, where he was responsible for global development in over 40 offices reaching 160 countries. Additionally, he authored and co-authored the best-selling books Get Better, 15 Proven Practices to Build Effective Relationships at Work, and Everyone Deserves a Great Manager. There's a whole lot more I could say about your background, but I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight about your background or personal context before we dive on into the conversation?
No, I appreciate that very kind introduction. Just one edit. I've been with Franklin Covey for 29 years, and I was the chief people officer for 18 of those years.
Oh,
So I just
perfect.
don't want the current chief people officer to say, "Hey, wait a minute." So yeah, 18, almost 2 decades.
Very good. Well, either way, any way you slice it, that's a long time with some really great experience. And Franklin Covey is such a great organization doing some really cool work. And my own background in getting into this field. So I'm an HR, OD, change management guy myself. I remember seeing Stephen Covey speak like years and years ago. He has since passed on, of course. But I remember reading Seven Habits, I don't know, 3 decades ago. I remember seeing him speak multiple times early when I was an undergrad student and being inspired. And all of these were part of the reasons why I went the direction I went in my career. And so I definitely attribute a lot of what I've done to the work that you do and your team does at Franklin Covey. So thank you for all that.
Well, I love hearing that. I had the great honor of working directly with Dr. Covey for many years before his passing, which was what, about 12, 13 years ago now. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Well, as we get started, there is a lot of work out there on difficult conversations. There's a lot of work out there on emotional intelligence. How do you see these two areas kind of overlapping?
Well, they both require a great deal of empathy. So I'll start there.
Yeah.
And so if I was meeting with someone the other day, and they were saying, "Gosh, if you could sum up, how you effectively navigate and coach people on having difficult conversations," it all begins with empathy. Empathy is, as you know, I'm sure through all of your education degree, empathy is really the foundation for emotional intelligence. And just from a starting place, as Dr. Covey used to teach, from a starting place of, as best we can, putting ourselves in the other person's position, not agreeing or disagreeing with them, but if we can start from places as opposite as we might be in our views of particular things, particularly in the climate we're in today here in the U.S. and
Yeah.
other places, if we can suspend our views long enough to just hear the other person, that's I've learned over many years, that's the right starting place.
So I suspect you would not agree with Elon Musk that empathy is the defining negative aspect of Western civilization.
Yeah, it's while I try to watch myself very carefully in the interviews, and I'll get political. That's a fair statement that you shared.
Yeah, I don't even think that's a political statement. I
No,
think empathy is powerful. It's important, and I definitely do not see it as a weakness. I agree. I think it's just so important. And one day, perhaps I'll have an opportunity to ask a follow-up question to Mr. Musk and to try to better understand what he actually meant, because I can't imagine that he actually meant
maybe
what is portrayed in that soundbite.
maybe
Anyways,
there was a language barrier or something there. Oh,
maybe. Okay. Well, anyways, getting back to the main conversation here. So we all, find ourselves in difficult conversations all the time, right? maybe it's with a spouse or, a partner or loved one. It's amazing, actually. Oftentimes, it is those we care about the most that we have some of the most difficult conversations, right?
Right.
Because we have intimate, um, trusting relationships with them, and so often, we are more vulnerable with them, and that can lead to challenging conversations. And so, whether it's in our home with a loved one, whether it's with a close friend, but we've all experienced them in the workplace. Sometimes they're very productive, sometimes they can derail into unproductive, difficult conversations. Um, the question then becomes like, how can we engage in these difficult conversations, but stay collaborative, stay positive and productive, knowing that they're going to happen. Like we
Yeah.
can't avoid them. So, I mean, sometimes I see people or I hear people talk about essentially trying to avoid them as if like that's a thing. Like we can just somehow magically go through life never having some sort form of conflict. And I just don't think that's possible.
Yeah. Well, you spark a couple of thoughts I'd love to share there. First, it is so interesting, as you state, the people that we are closest to, family members, sometimes when we say we let down our guard, that makes sense. We're more vulnerable with those people. But I also have seen people be more careless with those people. It's
Sure.
like
Yeah.
it's like, gosh, well, I care more about offending, not offending a colleague at work than I do about offending my partner or one of my children or something. And of course, when we step back and say, well, wait a minute, who are the most important people in your life? I think most people, maybe not all, most people would say, my family, my spouse, and my children, and yet we become more careless with them, and I think it's because there's this, you said it, there's this implied or unimplied foundation of trust that, and this almost this contract, with family members that, well, I can say whatever I want, and if you get offended, we'll have time to make it up. Whereas with a colleague or a work associate, who knows what that will lead to? And I call that out just to say, I think that's a really important point for all of us to reset on and say, well, wait a minute, why wouldn't I care more about offending the person I love so much than a colleague that I care about? But so the point I'm trying to make is let's slow down and be considerate with everyone. Let's show respect regardless of who we're with. So that was just something that, as you were sharing that, I think this notion of not speaking up when there's a difficult topic at hand, that's human nature. We want to avoid.
Yeah.
We want to, we don't want to offend. But boy, I think when you think about it, the greatest offense um, you could make, at least with me, is if I was doing something and we worked together and you could see it, but you don't bring it to my attention. While I can appreciate you don't want to hurt my feelings, but boy, to let me flounder and continue to have, and I had that experience as when I was the chief people officer, we called our team people services, and there was a person on the team, really good person, really talented person, but they had a behavior that was really hurting their reputation, and in turn was hurting the reputation of our team. And I had seen it, and this is embarrassing to admit, I was kind of hoping it would just go away on its own because I didn't want to address it. It was uncomfortable. And then other team members brought it to my attention. And I said, yeah, I need to address that. And here I am coaching leaders all day long to grow a spine and address these kinds of things. And I could totally relate to, their hesitancy to do so. Anyway, long story short, when I finally sat down and had the conversation with this person, and I began by saying, this has been a problem for a while, and I want you to know I care deeply about our relationship. And so I've hesitated to bring it up. Anyway, we went through the discussion, talked about it. And this person, when I was finished, they said, can I tell you what is most offensive to me here? Is that you said you have not seen this for months and you have not shared.
Uh,
And they said to me, well, I may disagree with you on this, it's most hurtful that you wouldn't have brought this to me right away. And I have
yeah.
never forgotten that lesson. So, just to your point, I think the most compassionate, caring thing we can do, if we're sincere, is to have the conversation, to have the difficult conversation.
Yeah, and I mean it's uncomfortable. No, nobody wants to, have difficult conversations, put anyone on the spot, to be negative. I mean, yeah, nobody wants that,
Right.
but it's hard. Like I found myself in a new supervisory role, having to deal with a performance issue with someone who had been in the organization for a really long time. And I sat the person down. We'd known each other for a long time, and they knew that I genuinely appreciated them and cared about them as a person. So luckily, I had that, emotional, you know, capital built up, and that bank, built. That was good. So we could have the conversation, but you know, I was frank with them. I'm like, we got to deal with these issues. And the person had been with the organization for like 20 years.
Wow.
And the issue had been an issue for a long time. And it literally was the first time anyone had talked to them about it. you know? And they were kind of just dumbfounded. Like they're like, what in the world? Like, how has this been the
Yeah.
first time anyone's talking to me about this?
Yeah.
And to your point, like, so, I was uncomfortable. I was taking the opportunity to talk to him about it. Um, at the end of the day, though, they just said thank you, because
Finally.
at this point they actually could do something about it. Because they
Yeah.
didn't even know.
Yeah, that's a great story and good for you. I bet many of the listeners have had that experience where, sure, there's a defensiveness. We all, oh gosh, I don't want to be, thought of as doing something wrong. But when I can calm down from that defensiveness, if I've got someone I trust, like you, like they did you in this situation, I bet the appreciation was huge that you finally someone had the courage to point something out to them. In the work session, we have a work session called Navigating Conversations. And the whole foundation for the work session is courage and consideration.
Hmm.
And as much as possible, we try and keep this balance of courage and consideration going. And you and I are both talking about, how challenging it can be to be courageous. But if our heart is in the right place, if we sincerely want to help someone, then it's not easy, but it's easier because we know why we're doing it. And so if we can keep this balance, and we coach and teach in the course how you keep courage and consideration in balance is by expressing your purpose and then your positive intent. So I can't tell you how many conversations, John, in my career, especially when I was in the chief people officer role, but even now, how many conversations I begin with, I want to talk to you about something, and I want you to know my only intent in sharing this with you is because I care deeply about you and your success. Or I care deeply about your reputation, and of course I'm sincere when I say that. But I have found that if I begin the conversation with those words or words like those, and they're sincere, I can share even the most difficult of things to share. And I may jump back to that statement and say, hey, again, Fred, I want you to know I'm sharing this because I care about you. And if the situation were reversed, I would hope we'd have enough trust in our relationship that you would share the same, share things with me. So by beginning by sharing your purpose and your positive intent goes a long way in helping you get the words out and get the topic on the table and start discussing how we're going to address this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've already laid out a bit of a framework for how we can start to do that effectively. Um, Maybe you can speak a little bit more to that. So
Yeah,
we have these emotionally tense situations. We're having a difficult conversation with somebody. Defensiveness, the walls of defensiveness are put up.
yeah.
What are some of those challenges and what are some strategies that we can put in place um, to address those challenges when having these difficult conversations?
Great question. So the strategies we coach on are first, before I have the conversation, to step back and make sure I'm seeing the situation clearly. Make sure that my paradigm isn't, well, somebody told me this and I'm seeing it that way because this other person told me, but make sure as best we can that it really is something that should be addressed and that we don't have some unconscious bias, pushing me to
Hmm.
see it a certain way when it's not accurate. And that's easier said than done, but I think
Sure.
it's wise to just pause, slow down, make sure I'm seeing the situation correctly. Let's assume that's happened. Then the formula we teach is, again, purpose and positive intent. And we say in that order. And why I'm bringing that up is many people, myself included, have been tempted to start out the conversation. Let's say I've got something difficult to address with you, John. It's very tempting to do this. They call it the sandwich, the sandwich of
Yep.
bad news. So, John, you are so great. We love you on the team. Everybody loves you. It's so great. Oh, we got this one little thing that's bugging everybody. But we got to talk about that. But gosh, we love you so much. And it's misleading it comes from a good place, but it's not helpful. So purpose and positive intent. What I just did versus John, thanks for your time. I need to talk to you about something difficult. It's a behavior that is hindering your performance. Purpose. But John, I want you to know my only intent in talking about this is I care deeply about your success. You have contributed greatly to this team, and there's something that is getting in the way of you fully contributing, and so that's what I want to bring up. But I care deeply about your success. Starting it that way, people will not fight me on that, but say, "Gosh, can't I just say first how great they're?" You can, but I've seen people who start out with the positive intent and get so sincerely flowery that the person is sitting there going, okay, I know you're going to talk to me about something, but what are you talking to me about? And this conversation is kind of going all over the board. And am I getting promoted? Am I getting fired? Where are we going with this? And so while it feels a little bit counterintuitive, the kindest thing we can do is say, hey, John, thanks for your time. I need to talk to you about a performance behavior. I'm making this up, whatever the situation is, but a performance issue. But I want you to know I care deeply about you, and that's why I'm having this conversation. Just while it can kind of jolt the person into reality, it's at least they know why they're there. They're not sitting there wondering what it is that you're going to talk about. So purpose first,
It,
then positive intent.
it's because whether you intend it that way or not, the sandwich method feels manipulative, right? And so someone sitting on the other side of it, they're not stupid, and they've seen it play out in TV shows, and
Mhm.
it's made fun of, right? And it's always there's a comedy track behind it. They've seen it enough, like they know what's happening, and it just feels manipulative, even if it's sincere, like even if the other person is like completely sincere about the praise that they're giving them. And so there's that problem of it just coming across that way, feeling that way a lot of times to the person, who's on the other side. Um, and then the other problem is sometimes people just are aloof enough that they don't really get it. Like I've literally seen people when the sandwich method is used that they actually think that they're being praised. Like they don't hear the performance issues that need to be addressed. And so it's like again, there's like TV shows where this is mocked, but like it's like the old adage, the old kind of funny story where the person gets broken up with and they don't even know they've been broken up with, right? Because there's so much flowery stuff thrown in there to kind of soften the blow that they think that you're still their boyfriend or their girlfriend because they don't even know that you broke up with them. So I mean, the intent may be good, but ultimately you're just making it harder for everybody. And you can still be sincere and you can still show them you care about them, but just be straightforward, like
That's
you
right.
said.
That's right. Well, and I have a great way of doing that, but you remind me of it. You're going to think this is a sitcom. This is a very true story. One of my general managers, one time, they were back east, and they had let a person go, and we were in a part of that conversation. It wasn't in our company; it was in a previous company, and a woman, she had let a person go, and she came back the next day, and the person she let go was sitting at their desk, and so she walked right past it, went into her office, and she called their HR person and said, I let her go, but she thinks she still works here. And just what you said, it was like it was right out of a sitcom, but this was a true story. I know the person well. And upon reflection, she realized she had handled the conversation with such care and concern that the message never got through. So very real situation. Something that I always do as a habit, and I always advise everyone to do, whether it's a performance plan or not. I always, after a difficult conversation, I will send an email. I will send the person an email,
Follow up. Yeah.
sometimes a text, and I will say, "Hey, John, thanks so much for your time today. I know this was a difficult situation. I appreciated you hearing me out. Here is what we discussed." And I will outline it, not in the form of a contract or sign here if you agree, but I will say, "Here's what we discussed." And then, and this is important, I will not say, "Is this how you see it?" I will say, "Have I missed anything? Have I missed anything? Is this how you see it? sends this subliminal message that, oh, well, we're still going to debate this because I don't really agree with you. But I say, have I missed anything? And that gives people like this, like the example I was giving you, this, if my friend, our former GM, had done that, obviously the person she let go would have been shocked. But she went, wait a minute, did you let me go? Yes, it makes up for all sorts of errors that can happen in the conversation. And it's compassionate, it's worded nice. I appreciate you. Here's what we discussed. Have I missed anything? Most cases when I do that, people will say, no, this is what we discussed, and thanks for the follow-up. Every once in a while they'll say, oh, okay, I didn't realize this was happening too. You said that I couldn't do this. Yes, that's what we discussed. It just gives great written documentation, so that there's no gray area, there's no misunderstanding.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to is you just want to be clear.
Right.
That's the most compassionate thing is to be
Because you
clear.
care. Yeah, because you care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now it can be so like you can be so clear that it's cold and robotic and you don't want that either, but you can have an in between, right?
Right. And
Like
John, to that point, sorry to interrupt. To that point, you just remind me. I will begin for that very reason. I'll be gone with, hey, John, thanks for your time yesterday. I really appreciate it. I know it was a difficult conversation. Hey, I've just jotted down what we discussed. This helps me as much as I hope it helps you, just to make sure we're clear on everything we covered. Have I missed anything? Just so yeah, you want to soften it so that it's not this cold directive that you're getting in an email.
Yeah. I think to that point, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Moneyball,
Yes.
the baseball movie, but
Yeah.
like they have the cold robotic down to a T, right? When they're like telling someone they're getting traded to another team or whatever, they literally like sit them down, they walk them in, they like hand them a slip of paper. It's like a 2 second conversation. And like, I'm like, that's probably a bit much, like probably a little bit too cold and a little bit too robotic. You could probably have a little bit more like emotion and compassion with the person that you've worked with and been a team member with teammate with for a while. But anyways, but being straightforward, that's just really important, and I think that's the key takeaway here. Okay, as we're kind of getting close to the end of our time together, but maybe the last thing we can discuss briefly, um, hopefully it's becoming obvious to people that really having difficult conversations should be something that can be leveraged to help teams become better. But maybe you can speak to that for a minute. I think sometimes people think conflict hurts us,
Right.
so
Right.
we should avoid conflict. We should just all try to get along. And difficult conversations lead to conflict. Talk us through that though, about how like actually perhaps counterintuitively to some that can actually build more effective teams.
Absolutely. In fact, I was just on a call this morning. I'm so glad you brought this last question up because Stephen M. R. Covey, this is the son
Mhm.
of Stephen R. Covey. I have to clarify that for some people. Stephen M. R. Covey is the best-selling author of The Speed of Trust, a New York Times bestseller, and has walked in his father's footsteps and is now this prominent speaker all around the world on trust. And he says that, and we just talked about this morning. He says that collaboration is the collision of differing opinions and ideas, but in an environment of trust. That's where we get collaboration. We don't want everybody thinking the same. We don't want, you've got to see it my way. We want to see things differently, but when we do that in an environment of trust, it becomes true collaboration. And so I know that's not exactly as you position this conflict, but I think the point here is if we can have a high trust relationship, if John and I have worked together for a long time, and I know, gosh, John's always had my back, John's always looked out for me. So when he's bringing something to me that's kind of hurtful to hear, yeah, it feels awkward, it stings, but I have this history with John. So I have this trust that, okay, John is looking out for my good. So I'm gonna as best I can put that defensiveness aside and really hear him out. So conflict for conflict's sake isn't helpful. But differing opinions or feedback, creating a culture of feedback, and I don't want to go into another space here, but in one of our other work sessions, we talk about creating a culture of feedback where feedback is the norm, where giving and receiving feedback is the norm. And if we can make that the norm, and I've been honored and fortunate to work in environments like that, where when somebody says, "Hey Todd, have you got a few minutes? We got some feedback for you," in any other company, everybody goes, "Oh crap, what did Todd do wrong?" but
Mhm.
in those cultures where it's common, it's actually looked for. We relish it because we know we're all helping each other get better.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I, again, sometimes it may feel a little bit counterintuitive, especially when you're in it in the moment and it
Right.
feels uncomfortable, but really it's so necessary, and it's going to be ultimately so helpful to you. And so I think from both of us to anyone who's in the audience today, let's, if you find yourself in those situations, take a step back, think about truly if you're in a situation where you want to be able to grow and develop, um, that can only happen, sometimes through tension, sometimes through discomfort, but it's not going to happen if you just put your head in the sand and if you just ignore, right? And
Right.
so we have to be able to address issues. So, well, Todd, this has just been a great conversation. I know there's a whole lot more that could be said, but we're going to pause there for now. Before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word for today.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, I've been with FranklinCovey for 29 years. I'm now a senior consultant with them, doing wonderful things like this, meeting wonderful people like you and clients around the world every day. And so you can just go to franklincovey.com, and on that website, look up any of our work sessions, our solutions, ways to connect with me and other consultants that work with FranklinCovey or work for FranklinCovey. My message for the day would be, you mentioned one of the books that I was honored to write, Get Better, 15 Proven Practices to Build Effective Relationships at Work. My message would just be that relationships matter. In fact, I can't think of anything that matters more. So, at the risk of offending Elon Musk, I think relationships matter.
They do. They matter so much. Relationships drive trust. Trust drives everything, right? So,
Absolutely.
amen to that. Todd, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out to get connected, find out more about what Todd and his team at Franklin Covey can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe. That you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a